structured interview is questioning technique that follows a preset series of questions in particular order. A question is a written set of questions or statements which people can apply by making the responses in the form. Here, the researcher will ask the question about the issue they are studying, and the questions in interview or telephone can vary. But commonly, the questions at the survey are all the same for everyone answering the survey. So the researcher ticks the questions accordingly, right, in the survey method. In general, surveys are in two types, that is population survey, census, and sample survey. Population survey are very common when we have the people coming to our homes and checking the population, right? Finding out how many people are there, the family size, male members, female, all this to get into the census, right? To create a census for the government, right? So that is a population survey. Another one is a sample survey. Sample survey is when you do some research on any particular subject and you are planning to take a sample out of it, right? So you do a sample, you develop a questionnaire related to the kind of subject that you want to research on, and accordingly you do the sample survey, right? So sample surveys are found to yield accurate findings and predictions when carried out carefully, and the sample is a good representation of the sample. Like if you want to take a sample of the whole district, you don't have to travel right around the district, but you just take a few places in the districts and from there you take a sample, right? So that's how. What is the advantage of the survey method? It is efficient way of collecting information from large number of respondents, like the population survey that we are talking about. Very large samples are possible. Statistical techniques can be used to determine validity, reliability, and statistical significance. You see, when we are using the large samples, we use a lot of statistics. Like you can take the SPSS, where you can analyze the data in loading all your information in the statistical in the SPSS format. So that's how, and which can be reliable. That means that information is it can be relied upon, and it is valid, and it has a statistical significance that is scientifically done. And because they are standardized, they are relatively free from several types of errors. So when we do it in a scientific way, we can avoid a lot of errors. What is the disadvantage of the survey method? It depends on the motivation, honesty, and memory of and ability of the persons to respond. So whenever we are doing a survey, it is not necessary the persons have to give accurate or honest answers. Sometimes they may not want to tell us certain things. So they will tell what they think is right. It may not be the correct one. Subjects may not be aware of the reason for the given actions. So they must have forgotten. So their motivation, like, to give the right answers, in fact, maybe present themselves in favorable light. Like they want to present themselves to say that all is well and everything is okay. So they don't want to give an exact honest opinion. If you are talking about, suppose you are taking a survey on, the kind of violence that is prevalent or the kind of abuse that is happening. These are all not comfortable questions. So sometimes people do not want to give us the accurate answers. Structured surveys, particularly those with close-ended questions, may have low validity. Structured survey is the survey that is developed in a very systematic way. Okay, so this is all about survey. So when you get questions about the survey method, you can write about all this, whatever we have spoken. So it's very easy for you, right? Another method in the research is the case study method. The case study method is another field of psychological inquiry or research. It is directed to a study of an individual behavior or one single unit called as a case. Like mostly if you are taking the case records, it is used in the hospital-based setting. It is used in the clinical-based setting, in a counseling scenario. Sometimes it can be used even by the organizations when they are planning to collect case studies. Case studies may be related to domestic violence, or maybe case studies related to substance abuse. Like that, case studies related to various things where an individual is interviewed or where an individual is spoken to, and all the information is taken so that they are able to prepare the case study. The case study helps to locate unique experiences of life as well as those various emotional and adjustment problems of the individual. Suppose if a psychiatrist is taking the case study, you will take all the details, the name, the age, the diagnosis, from where the person has come, the background of the person, so all this. So hospital-based setting, and institutional-based setting and all. So that is how a case study is done. Now, what is the advantage of the case study? It knows the subject's background, which helps a person to understand, the influences and the forces that shape the development. And then this method is an excellent amount of information which provides carefully and gives us a lot of insight, right? We'll be able to look into the insight as we keep collecting the case studies. The method has rich source of hypothesis for future research. So if you have collected some 20 to 25 case studies, for example, if you have collected case studies on any one particular subject, you will be able to see the trend. Like, as you keep doing the case studies, you'll be able to see what is the trend that is very commonly running through all these case studies. And on that basis, you can make a hypothesis. Hypothesis means a tentative solution to a problem that is existing. It could be any social problem, or it could be even a psychological problem, right? So that is all about case studies. So please go through it again. You'll be able to understand, right? Another important method, right, in the psychological research is the experimental method. Now, what is this experimental method?
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, can you again explain the case sheet study, ma'am?
Yeah, case study method is nothing that you collect information from particular individual, right? When you collect information from the particular individual, the details, the background, and all that you want to, based on the kind of study you are doing, that becomes a case study method, right? Which is commonly used in clinical settings, which is also commonly used by institutions if they are doing study on any particular social issue, like maybe alcoholism, or maybe drug abuse, or maybe domestic violence, or maybe child sexual abuse, right? You can't do a general survey about this kind of thing. So if you want to do case studies, right, you want to understand this kind of very sensitive issues of the society, you can go for case studies. You can collect some 25 to 30 cases and analyze those cases, right, based on the kind of questions you develop and based on the issue. Yes, am I clear?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Now, experimental are three kinds of relevant variables that are taken into account. They are organismic variables, situation variables, and sequential variables, right? And organismic variables are related to personal characteristics of participants, such as age, sex, personality features, right? Situation variables are concerned with the quality of the physical environment during the conduct of the experiment, such as temperature, humidity, and noise. Sequential variables are related to the procedure of conducting the experiment, when the participant is required to be tested across several conditions. Hence, the exposure of the participants to varied conditions may result either in attaining proficiency due to practice effects or developing fatigue and monotony towards the experiment. A controlled experiment permits a psychologist to test hypotheses about the relationship between two variables, whether this relationship is one of cause and effect. An investigator manipulates one or more stimulus variable and observes the effect of one or more behavior. In experimental research, deliberately manipulate the variables they think is causing some behavior while holding all the other variables that might interfere with experiment's results. That way, if they observe any changes behavior, they know that the change must be due to manipulated variables. Now, in this experimental, I have used certain words, like I've used the term variable, right? And here you have also in your book, you see page number 42. In the first paragraph, you have found three different types of variable. I also use the word hypothesis, right? Now we understand what is a variable, right? A variable is a characteristics of a situation that can be changed. A variable is something that can be changed, such as characteristics or values. Variables are generally used in psychology experiments to determine if changes to one thing results in changes to another, right? If I have to give you a simple example, suppose if I tell you usage of cell phone causes deafness, right? So usage, the cell phone here will be the variable, right? Variable will be again independent variable, dependent variable, and there is also extraneous and confounding variables. As you keep reading, you will understand better. Okay. So a variable is something that can be changed. So usage of cell phone can cause disease. So what am I saying? The hypothesis here is that if I use this particular gadget, right, it is causing me a health problem. Now, this is hypothesis. I do not know that is correct or wrong, but I am thinking like this because I heard few people telling, or I heard it, or I saw something happening like that, right? So just an hypothesis. Now, this has to be tested. So in an experimental method, I need to understand how I have to prove this point of what I am saying is true. Okay. So here the variable will be the cell phone, and what will be the independent variable will be the cell phone, and what will be the dependent variable will be the deafness. That is caused because of, so cause and effect. Okay. So types of variables involved in experimental psychology. Most are independent variable, dependent variable, extraneous and confounding variables are involved in experimental psychology. Now, what is independent variable? Is a variable that is controlled and manipulated by experiment. Now, here I have given an example. In an experiment of the impact of sleep deprivation on test performance, right? So, sleep deprivation would be the independent variable. Okay. And what will be the dependent variable here? The dependent variable will be the test scores. Okay. So the dependent variable is the variable that is measured by the experimenter. In our previous example, the scores on the test performance measure would be the dependent variable. Am I clear till here, students? Students,
Yes.
am I clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good. So you read it again. After I explain, you read it again. You will have a better understanding. Okay. So extraneous and confounding variables. So what is this extraneous and confounding variable? It is important to note that the independent and the dependent variables are not only variables present in many experiences. In some cases, extraneous variable may also apply in the room. This type of variable is one that may have impact on the relationship between the dependent and the independent variables. Now we continue with the same example of sleep deprivation and testing scores. Okay. So for example, in our previous description of experiment on the effects of sleep on test performance, there could be other factors that could be involved. Okay, in this research. Now, what are the other factors? The other factors could be age, gender, academic background, may have the impact on the results. In such a case, the experimenter will note the values of this extraneous variable, and so the impact on the results can be controlled upon. Okay. So we have now independent variable, dependent variable, extraneous variables, and confounding variables, right? So independent variable is the cause and dependent variable is the effect, and the other things that happens because of the effect, that is, we take into account the gender, the background, the academics, and all will result in the confounding and extraneous variable. There are two basic types of extraneous variable. One is the participant variables. Now, what is this? The factors that include the background differences, mood, anxiety, intelligence, awareness, and other characteristics that are unique to a person, right? So these are participant variables. Situational variables, what are these? These are if person taking a test in a given situation. The situation could be a room which is very cold. The temperature is either too hot or very cold, right? And it affects the participants while interviewing or while taking the experiment, right? The person may get distracted, or the person may get annoyed. The person may not able to adapt to the room temperature, right? So these will be the situational variables. In many cases, extraneous variables are controlled by the experimenter. In the case of participant variable, the experimenter might select the participant that are the same background and the temperature to ensure that these factors do not interfere with the results, right? However, a variable cannot be controlled if it becomes what is known as a confounding variable. This type of variable can have impact on dependent variable, which can make it difficult to determine if the results are due to influence of the independent variable, confounding variable, or interaction of the two. Okay. So operationally defining a variable. Suppose if you get a 1 mark, 2 mark question, what is a variable? How do you define it? Just be very clear. What is a variable, which is already given here. Okay. So before conducting a psychology experiment, it is essential to create an operational definition, right? For both the independent variable and dependent variable. An operational definition describes how the variables are measured and defined within the study. For example, in our imaginary experiment of the effects of sleep deprivation on test performance, we would need to create a specific operational definition for the two variables, right? So in the already given example, the two variables we spoke about, one is the sleep deprivation, another one is a test variable, right? So what will be the hypothesis? The hypothesis is the students who are sleep deprived will score significantly lower on test. This is the hypothesis. Means this is what I think, this is what I believe, but I need to prove this in a research, in an experiment. Okay. Then we would have different concepts to define. So first, what do we mean by students? So you have to define students. Who are the people you are taking? Let's define students as participants enrolled in an introductory university level psychology course. Like you can say they are BA students or BSc students or in whichever student or intermediate student or school students. So you have to define before doing the experiments, who are these kind of participants you are taking for experimentation. Next, we need to operationally define sleep deprivation variable. In our example, let us say sleep deprivation refers to those participants who have had less than 5 hours of sleep. Like now, sleep deprivation is a broad word. Like sleep deprivation, some people who may not sleep the whole night also are deprived of sleep. Some people who sleep only for 1 or 2 hours also deprived of sleep. Some people who are sleeping only for 4 hours also are deprived of sleep. So we should be clear about when we are talking about sleep deprivation, what are we saying? What is the kind of definition we are giving to our own research? Finally, we create operational definition for test variable. For example, the test variable will be defined as the student score on a chapter in the exam on introductory to psychology course. So all this definition need to be given. When we define all this, it is called operational definition, right? Okay, so we move on now. Methods of establishing experimental control. You come to page number 43, okay, and then you read up the whole details about how you need to, continue with this method with taking careful samples, right? Regulating the experimental conditions, minimizing the variable error. So there are 6 important ways to control extravenous variable. Extravenous variables are those additional variables we may not look at it in the beginning, but later on it gets added on, we take into account. Okay. So elimination. Okay. In this technique, extravenous variables are eliminated from experimental setting. This is more direct and simple method of establishing control. This involves eliminating those conditions that distorts the results. This may be done at the subject level or in the experimental situation, right? So when you are doing like same thing, we take sleep deprivation and test scores. You don't want to get into other details. Like suppose you don't want to take the gender into consideration, right? You are not talking about the differences of male and female. So you can eliminate one. You are focusing only on the male or you're focusing only on the female, right? So like that, you can eliminate what you do not want. And then making conditions constant. In this technique, the extravenous variable, which cannot be eliminated, are kept constant in order to make the effort same during the entire experiment. This method demands equality and similarity of all experimental conditions, okay, to all the experimental groups. Okay, so this is what you do. You keep some variables as constant, right? You can't collect data just having 10 or 20 samples only with related to, maybe gender or academic, and then again 10, 20. No, you should have a uniformity, like, where the variables what you're using are constant to the whole group. And the control group method. This method is very common. Okay, it is used in several experimental situations. It is called the balancing technique. Here you have two groups, right? Two groups, and one is the control group and the other one is the experimental group. For example, you want to test the differences between, maybe the usage of cell phone and the non-usage of cell phone. And then you have one group people who are using cell phone and they're having problems. And there are other group of people who are not using problems and they're doing well in studies, right? So the control group will be one group where you are not giving them the cell phone. The other group, experimental group, will be one. So based on that, you draw up the inferences and analysis and come to a findings, and then you will be able to tell, yes, usage of cell phones, causes blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now, match pair technique. A match pair technique is a special case of randomized block design. It can be used when experiment has only treatment of two conditions. The subject can be grouped in pairs based on some block variable. Then within each pair, subjects are randomly assigned different treatments. Okay. So these are all experimental kind of settings where we match with pair technique, group technique, random assignment, matching, and counterbalancing. Okay. So you please read up the whole detail and try to understand. Now, stages of experimental method. This is very important, right? So there are some 7 stages. You remember there are 7 stages in the experimental method, right? 7 stages in the experimental method. There are several stages are involved in the experimental design. It can be thought of as the structure of the research. It is the glue, right, that holds all the elements in the research project together. That is, when we follow these 7 in order, right, one by one in a very systematic way, then you are able to come out with the scientific research. We are able to come out with the experimental method. Okay. So point number 1, that is the stage 1. I am on page number 45. So what is the stage 1 in this research? The stage 1 in this research is describing the problem. Okay, you will see that clearly written description of the problem. A problem is a question to be considered or solved or answered, right? So even before you embark upon an experimental design, an experimental research, you need to take one problem, that needs to be solved, or a question that needs to be answered, right? Like how we have given the previous setting, previous hypothesis, what we have spoke, sleep deprivation, test scores, usage of cell phone, right? Like that, so many things we can take, whatever we feel we want to do the research. So look at the problem is a question to be answered. That is the problem statement. That is how you describe the problem. Okay, that is the first step in the scientific method. The second is the hypothesis writing. Now, what is this hypothesis? You form a hypothesis on the observation about the past or the present. Now, scientists use the knowledge of past events to develop a general principle or explanation. This general principle is called hypothesis. The types of reasoning involved is called the inductive reasoning. Now, what is inductive reasoning? It is deriving a generalization from specific details, right? So you find out one problem, right? As I told you, you focus on one small problem, right? You experiment on that, right? And you do a study on that, and then you come to a general conclusion and say, now, because we have, I have done this experiment, as per this experiment scientific analysis, this is the kind of answers that can come for solution, right? So you can, like, for if you want an example, it could be like same thing, sleep deprivation, gives rise to poor test scores, right? Now, sleep deprivation, you are conducting this actually in one small sample group, right? Maybe you are doing it a small sample group of intermediate student or school students or college students, right? And from there, you are drawing the analysis and you are generalizing and coming out to the solution and say, yes, this group of people, the group of school students or the college students, if the sleeps are deprived, the test scores are low. Okay, so that's how you come out with it. A hypothesis should have the following characteristics. So before you write the hypothesis, form the hypothesis, you need to keep certain things in mind. There are certain characteristics. That is, a hypothesis should have the following characteristics. It should have general principle that holds across space and time, right? That means you should not take controversial subjects, to do the research. You should take subjects which you are able to do it, where it's easy for you to collect the data, where it's easy for you to meet the people, take the information, do the reference, do a literature review, all this, okay? It should be a tentative idea, right? It is a guess. It is a tentative guess and a tentative solution, okay? It should agree with the available observations or whatever you have. It should be kept as simple as possible, and it should be testable, potentially falsifiable. In other words, there should be a way to show that the hypothesis is false or a way to disapprove the hypothesis. So a hypothesis is something that you form, and at the end of the experiment, you are able to prove that hypothesis, or you are able to say, no, this is not correct. Either that hypothesis is right or the hypothesis is not Right. Okay. So that is it. So first one is describing the problem. Second one is forming the hypothesis. And the third one is you make a prediction. Right. When we made a hypothesis, the tentative may or may not be true, then how can we decide if the hypothesis is true? So what we do? Our hypothesis should be broad. It should apply uniformly through time and through space. Scientists cannot usually check every possible situation where a hypothesis might apply. Let's consider the hypothesis. All plant cells have nucleus, right? This is a hypothesis. We cannot examine every living plant and every plant that has ever lived to see if the hypothesis is false. Instead, what we do, we generate a prediction using deductive reasoning. Now, what is deductive reasoning? Generating a specific expectation from generalization. Okay. So we are on page number 45. We are on page number 45. Okay. So we make a prediction, right? For the above hypothesis, it was inductive reasoning. From generalizing, we are going to the specific details. And when we are doing this prediction, we are looking at the general thing and we are coming to the specific. Stage number 4 is testing. Now test your hypothesis by doing an experiment. Your experiment tests whether your prediction is accurate, thus your hypothesis is supported or not. It is important for your experiment to have a fair test. You should repeat experiment several times to make sure the first results weren't just an accident. That means you repeat the accident a few times so that you are sure of the results. Stage number 5 is analyzing the results. Once the experiment is complete, you collect your measurements and analyze them to see if they support your hypothesis or not. Scientists often find that the predictions were not accurate and the hypothesis was not supported. In such cases, they will be communicating the results of the experiment and then go back and construct the new hypothesis and prediction based on the information they learned during their experiment. This starts much of the process of the scientific method all over again. And then we come to the stage number 6, where we have the discussions, right? So the discussion is after the analysis part of the experiment, need to write the discussion and to interpret and describe the significance of your findings in light of what was already known about the research problem being investigated, and you explain new understanding of the science. So what you do after you analyze the results, there will be so many discussions that have happened right from the beginning till now. So you write the discussions of whatever was happening in the process of the experimentation. And the last stage is the report writing stage. So finally, an experimenter has to prepare the report of what has been done. Writing a report must be done with great care in view of the following, right? So there are 3 brief stages, which is given very beautifully here. The layout of the report, right? What is in the layout of the report? The first part of the report will be preliminary stages. What is preliminary stages? The title of your experiment, right? Your name, date, all, etc. And the main text. The main text is the kind of a process you followed, and then the results that has come in and the conclusion that will come in the end matter. In the preliminary report should carry title, date, and acknowledgement forward. Okay. Now, what is the advantages of this experiment method? They're objective. Most scientific objective method of studying where determine use cause effect relationship. It is easily replicated and best results and conclusions. So if you are able to do this, some other person who want to do the research will follow the same method, right, of the process that you have followed and will be able to replicate it. Means they will be able to do it in the similar manner. And what are the disadvantages? It is costly and time consuming method. It is debatable whether experiment on animals are applicable to human beings. It can lead to artificial situation and it can be affected by errors. Okay. So here we close down this particular chapter, right? This chapter on this unit on, methods of psychology. So what are the research methods used in psychology? So what all we learned? We learned the introspection method. We learned the observation method, right? We learned about types of observation. We learned about survey method, case study method, and experimental method. In experimental method, we went through the whole steps that are involved. Okay. Then next we move on to the correlation method. This is also another method that is used in psychology, right? So what is the correlation method? It is a measure of, this is page number 46. This is a method, this is a measure of relationship between two variables, right? A variable is anything that can differ to the individuals in some measurable way. Height and weight are also variable. So years of education and reading speed, okay? So in psychological research, we usually wish to determine the relationship between two variables, okay? So the amount of study time is related to the student academic achievement, okay? So if you see that there is a relationship between the amount of study time and the student's academic achievement, if these two things are related, right, then you say they are correlated. It's a correlated research, okay? So you simply find out the relationship between these two variables and determine whether they are associated or not, okay? So that is what is done. So you read up the details about what is correlation procedure. It is given along with the examples, and you keep moving on how it is a statistical technique which helps in analyzing covariation and degrees of association between two or more variables, okay? And there are the purpose of correlation method. It is given in diagram. I'm on page number 42. You see there are three types of correlation methods that are given: positive correlation, negative correlation, and no correlation, the strength and the limitations, okay? So I think I will now close on this and move on to our next unit, unit number 4. Please turn to page number 52, right? Are you all with me? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So
Yes,
let us
ma'am.
get, yeah, unit number 4. So in the unit number 4, it is totally a new topic. It is neural basis of behavior. Okay. So what is the objective of this unit? The objective of the unit is to explain the importance of biology that underlies behavior, especially the brain and other parts of the nervous system, and describe the structure of neuron and the transmission of information in the neurons. The third objective is analyze the key neurotransmitters and their role in behavior. And the fourth is differentiate the major divisions of nervous systems involving central and autonomic nervous system. And the last objective is identify major areas of the brain and the relationship between the brain and the behavior. Okay. So this is a very important thing you need to understand. So I will go a little slow. That is why I finished the research methods enough. It is very easy for you. Research methods are not very difficult at all. If you go through, you can easily write all the methods. Okay. So we focus on this neural basis for behavior, which is on page number 52. Okay. Now, this unit describes the structure and the function of neurons, right? I may not be able to go page by page, but I will try so that you understand first. The unit describes the structure and the function of the neurons, okay? Neurons are building blocks of the nervous system. The communication in the neurons enables the transmission of information, right, within the nervous system. The structure and the functions of the brain. Now, how does the nervous system work, right? The nervous system is essentially made up of large number of nerve cells, right? You can say there are more than 100 or 150 billions of nerve cells, and they are called as neurons, okay? Now, this neuron is what is neuron? It's an individual cell in the nervous system that receives, integrates, and transmits information in the body. Okay, so you understand. A neuron is an individual cell in the nervous system, receives, integrates, and transmits information. Now, neurons are the basic link that allows the communication within the nervous system. Okay, so the communication happens only because of the nervous system, which is the basic link. Okay, what are the important parts of the neuron, right? The important parts of the neurons are cell body, dendrites, axon, and terminal buttons. This is already given in your book. If you go to page number 53, right? If you go to page number 53, you have a heading called the neuron. Okay. In this, you are given the important part of the neuron are cell body, dendrites, axon, and terminal buttons, right? Now, neural transmission begins in the cell at the dendrites, right? Now, what is the cell? What are the dendrites, right? You refer to page number 53. Now, dendrites are a branch-like structure that reaches out to the neurons or receptors to receive information. Okay, so dendrites are the branch-like structures that reaches to neurons, okay, to receive the information. So once the information is received, right, once it gets a signal, it picked up by the dendrites, it is passed on to soma. Okay, what is soma? Soma is the cell body of the neuron which contains a nucleus. Okay, now from the soma, the message reaches axon, right? Now what is axon? It is the longest fiber of a neuron that transmits information to other neurons, muscles, or gland. The basic message it carries is called action potential. Okay, are you here till with me? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Somebody put some message. Is it for me? Since I'm focusing on my subject, I'm not reading the messages. Anything you have asked me? No, right?
No, ma'am.
Okay, fine. Okay, so you understand this very clearly, how the communication in the nervous system enables transmission of information within the nervous system, the structure and the function of the brain. The nervous system essentially made up of large number of nerve cells, right? More than 1 billion nerve cells called neuron. Neuron is an individual cells in the nervous system that receives, integrates and transmits information. And neurons are the basic link that allows communication with the nervous system. The important parts of the neurons are cell body, dendrites, axon and terminal buttons. Neural transmission begins with the cell at the dendrites, right? And the dendrites are the structure that reaches out to the neurons to receive information. Okay, once the information is received, it is picked up by the dendrites and it is passed on to soma. And soma is the cell body of the neuron which contains the nucleus, right? And from soma, the message is reached to axon, right? And axon is the longest fiber of the neuron that transmit information to the other neuron muscles or glands, right? The basic message it carries is called the action potential. Now, action potential, what is action potential? It's a chemical event in the body, right? That starts at the end of axon and travels towards the terminal buttons. Most axons are covered with a myelin sheath, right? Now, what are myelin sheaths? These are fats and proteins that enable and encompasses the axon, right? Now, what is the purpose of the myelin sheath? The purpose of the myelin sheath is to increase the rate of transmission of information along with the length of the axon. Additional feature of the myelin sheath is that it's broken by small gaps. These gaps are known as nodes of Ranvier, which further assist in speeding the messages along the axon. As the axon comes to an, it divides into several small branches, which in turn ends up in round structures known as the terminal buttons. The functional connections between the neurons are called synapse, and that separation between the neurons is the synaptic cleft. Okay, all this is given in your book, right? Please go through your book. You'll be able to understand. You can see on page 53 the structure of the neuron, right? And very clearly written in the paragraph all that I so far spoke. Okay, and in the nature and the nerve conductor neurotransmitters, you find also very clear explanation how the communication happens within the neuron. You can see that on page number 54, and you can find all the details of it, right? How the communication happens between the neurons, very beautifully explained, right? Then you come to the page number 55, right? And you find how the communication happens not only in the written format, but it is also given in the diagrammatic format. So you please come to page number 56. You find a table, right? You find a table, neurotransmitters and their function, right? In that you find a beautiful table very clearly given to you. What is the neurotransmitter? Where is it located? What are the major function? And what are the disorders associated with malfunctioning of it? So you go one by one. There are 6 which is given to you. Okay, acetylcholine, that is ACH, which is located in the brain, spinal cord, and some of the organs of the parasympathetic nervous system. What are the major functions? Excitatory involved in muscle movement and memory. And if there is some malfunction in this area, there will be deficiency of ACH. And if the deficiency of ACH is there, what happens? It leads to memory loss. Like you have diseases of Alzheimer's, right? Or degeneration of the brain, right? Which causes brain diseases. Okay, so that is one. Another one is the dopamine. Now, where is it located? Dopamine is located in the midbrain, right? What are the major functions of it? It is inhibitory, control voluntary movement, affects moods, attention, and learning. So what happens if you don't have enough of dopamine flowing into, you feel sad, you can get depressed, right? So you see the disorder associated here. Excess of dopamine is linked to schizophrenia. What is schizophrenia? It is a mental illness, right? Mental illness where a person has delusions and hallucinations. What are delusions and hallucinations? These people hear certain sounds with other people do not hear, right? These people see certain things other people do not see. Okay, they are called schizophrenics and schizophrenia. Low levels of dopamine, right? When the supply is there of low, it is related to depression and also affects the people with Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease are neurological conditions where the nerves are disturbed, and you find people with Parkinson's who may be shaking their heads or shaking their hands, right? And then another neurotransmitter, very important, are the endorphins, right? Now, where are the endorphins located? They're located in the brain, in the spinal cord, right? What are the major functions? It inhibits transmissions of pain impulses, right? Oversupply results in insensitivity to pain. Undersupply results in the pain hypersensitivity, right? Endorphins are very important. It is also an hormone, a neurotransmitter. Like, a body releases when there is a lot of physical activity, right? And it keeps you happy, and a lot of it can cause problem, and less of it also can cause problem. Okay. Another neurotransmitter is called the GABA, right? Gamma aminobutyric acid. Okay. It is called GABA in short, right? Now, where is it located? It is located in the brain. That is the cerebral cortex and the cerebellum, right? And what are the major functions? Inhibitory, involved in motor behavior, right? What is motor behavior? Hand, legs movements, okay? A body move. Low levels of GABAs are linked to seizures, anxiety, and insomnia, right? You understand what seizures is? Yeah? No response? You understand what seizures is?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good. Seizures, anxiety.
Once again, ma'am.
Sorry?
Once again, explain, ma'am.
Once again. Okay. See, are you with me on page number 56? I'm on serial number 4.
Can you explain the definition of seizures, ma'am?
Seizures.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. See, low levels of GABA are linked to seizures. Seizures means like a person suddenly walking may fall and he will start shivering, hand, leg movements start shaking, right? Sometimes they can be froth, like a fix. Have you seen a person with convulsions? You understand convulsion? A person suddenly falls, right? The head and the hand and legs start shaking, right? Some people will give keys in the hand, right? I don't know what word it is used in Telugu, right?
Fits.
Yeah, like fits, right? That is anxiety, right?
Yes.
Heartbeat. Yeah, anxiety and insomnia, is sleeplessness, right?
Yes,
Not.
ma'am.
So low levels of this are linked to seizures, anxiety, and insomnia. Another important transmitter is the norepinephrine, right? Now, where is it located? It is located in the brain, target organ of sympathetic nervous system, right? What are the functions of that? It inhibits firing of the neurons in the central nervous system, but excites heart muscles and intestine, helps in emotional arousal. Low levels of results in depression, high level results in stress and hyperactivity. Okay. And the last of it in this table is a serotonin, right? It is also very important neurotransmitter, right? It is located in the brain and the spinal cord, right? And what are the major functions? It regulates sleep, mood, hunger, attention, and learning, right? And undersupply of it can lead to depression, sleeping, and eating disorder. Oversupply can lead to obsessive compulsive disorders, okay? Like they can be obsession of cleanliness, they could be compulsions of drinking, right? So all this, they can be behavioral or they can also be obsession in thoughts too, okay? So you understood this table, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. So we move towards it. The nervous system is also very, I'm on page number 58, right? The nervous system is very nicely, very clearly, given in a table form. The classification of nervous system. The human nervous system is massive and complex. It is typically divided into two major divisions, right? The nervous system is divided into two major divisions. One is the central nervous system, CNS. Another one is the peripheral nervous system, that is the PNS. The central nervous system is further divided into brain and spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system is classified into somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. The various parts of nervous system are interrelated and functions as a whole, right? You can see the broad classification. Can you see it on page number 58? Yes?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Very broadly, it is given nervous system, CNS, PNS, right? Brain, spinal cord, somatic, SNS, ANS, right? Sympathetic and all that stuff. Okay. So you take one by one and very gradually you learn. It is very easy. Okay. Don't get frightened looking at the diagrams and all that. Okay. Now, what is the central nervous system, right? The central nervous system is a complex structure which controls our behavior, regulates the internal working of our body, and serves as the basis for different psychological processes. The neural tissue present inside the skull and vertebral column is called the central nervous system. So you underline that. What is central nervous system? You should be able to say it. It is the neural tissue present inside the skull is known as the brain and the tissue inside the skull and vertebral column is the central nervous system. The neural tissue lies inside the skull is known as the brain, and the neural tissue present inside the vertebral column is called the spinal cord. You underline those. What is the brain? What is the spinal cord? Okay. Although the brain may be ultimate governing organ of the body, the spinal cord also plays an instrumental role in the body governance. So we can think that only brain is important. Yes, brain is important. It is like the CPU of the computer. But at the same time, the spinal cord also is equally important. Now, the spinal cord is a tube-like structure. It begins from the brain and tapers off in the size and descends to the lower back region, right? It runs to the middle of the bony column of hollow bones that protect spinal cords known as the vertebrae, right? It works both independently and in conjunction of the brain. The spinal cord contains two basic kinds of nerve sensories and motor nerves, right? It has two major functions. First, to carry sensory information via sensory nerve fibers from receptors of the body to the brain and send informations via motor nerve fibers from the brain to muscles and glands. Secondly, it plays a key role in processing various reflex behavior. Reflex is an automatic involuntary response to a stimulus that need to involve in the brain. Okay, so you look at the diagram below, the spinal cord and the reflex action. Everything is explained in the detail. Kindly go through it. You will have a better understanding. Okay, so this is all about the central nervous system and the spinal cord. Then there is brain. The human brain is exceedingly complex I am on page number 60, right? Consisting of more than 100 billion cells with an average of 1,450 grams. The human brain can be divided into 3 regions based on location. Now, what are the locations? The hindbrain, the midbrain, and the forebrain. Okay? The hindbrain, midbrain, forebrain constitute the major subdivisions, and these are further divided according to their structure and functions. The hindbrain is the oldest and the most primitive part of our brain. Its major parts include the medulla, the pons, and the cerebellum. Okay. Now, what are the functions? Our ability to survive from moment to moment depends on the hindbrain, right? Which is located at the base of the brain. The important structure of the hindbrain already mentioned about medulla, pons, and cerebellum, right? So you read up a little more, you will have a better understanding of what these functions are also, right? And then we go to the functions of the midbrain. What are the functions of the midbrain? Right? Move on to the page number 61, right? The midbrain also contains the substantia nigra, which acts as a conjunction with other brain structures to promote smooth voluntary bodily movements, right? When neurons in this brain area degenerate, as they do in Parkinson's disease, it becomes difficult for the person to walk and hands become shaky, right? So you can go through all the information, right, in detail, which is given here and underline, different aspects like, the sense receptors, how they work, right? And then the functions of the forebrain, right? The most important part of the human brain, at least for psychology, is the forebrain. It plays an important role in thinking, learning, memory, and emotions. Although forebrain is composed of many structures, we will discuss only hypothalamus, thalamus, limbic system, and cerebral cortex, right? Now that is also very nicely explained in details here on page number 61, right? So what are the functions of the forebrain? What is the functions of hypothalamus? Is what? A tiny neural mass located between the thalamus and the pituitary gland. It helps in regulating eating, drinking, body temperature, emotion, and sexual behavior, and regulates autonomic nervous system, thus influencing a range from sweating and salivation to shedding of tears and change in blood vessels. Okay, so please continue to read this all about hypothalamus, right? You'll have a better understanding. And then we move towards page 62, which is all about the cerebral cortex. Okay, what is cortex means? Bark, and the same rough wrinkled appearance as the bark of the tree. The cerebral cortex contains billions of neurons, and predominance of cell bodies gives the cortex a brownish gray appearance. The cortex is often referred as the gray matter. In evolutionary terms, it is most recently developed area of the brain, and therefore it is often referred as the new brain. Okay. Now, what are the functions? It is very clearly given again. It is subdivided into 4 major lobes, right? The frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. They differ in location and function. Okay. So please keep reading the details of the frontal lobe, the detail of the parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and temporal lobes are all given in your textbook. That is on page number 62. And it is also given very clearly in a diagram. If you go to page number 63, you see the major lobes of the human brain. Okay. If you look at this, where is the frontal lobe located? It is above the lateral fissure and in front of the central fissure, right? And then components are motor cortex and control body movements, right? And premotor cortex and prefrontal cortex. It controls delicate movements and decision-making, solving problems. Okay, that's all about the frontal lobe given in the table. And the second table has parietal lobe, which talks about the location, the components, and the function. And the third one is the occipital lobe and the temporal lobe. Everything is given to you here. And the next we move on to the localization of the brain function. We are on page number 64. The brain can be divided into 2 halves, the left cerebral hemisphere and the right cerebral hemisphere, right? The two hemispheres are connected by a band of fibers called the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum permits the two hemispheres to communicate with each other. So each know what the other is doing. And the result is the coordinated activity of the two hemispheres. Just as two hands may vary in both size and functions, the two hemispheres vary in both size and functions. Okay, just look at the differences that is given here, right? A table has been given. Difference in the hemisphere functions. What is the left function of the left hemisphere? It is of the verbal, understand and uses words to name and define, right? Uses symbols or concepts, represents, right, objects, right? And rational uses logic, draw conclusion and analyze, analytical thinking, right? This all happens in the left hemisphere, right? What happens in the right hemisphere? Non-verbal, where less use of words, right? We see objects as movement, use non-logical process and holistic, right? Holistic, that perceives complete structure of the overall pattern. It also appears that the left hemisphere is more analytical than the right, and the right hemisphere appears specialized for the perception of holistic patterns and music. Okay, so this is over, and then we come to the next, that is page number 65, autonomic nervous system. Okay, autonomic nervous system, what is it? It's a part of the nervous system outside the skull and the spine. It's called the peripheral nervous system. It is largely through the peripheral nervous system that we communicate with the rest of the world. The peripheral nervous system is further subdivided into two parts, the somatic and the nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. The somatic nervous system is involved in the control of voluntary muscles. The autonomous nervous system is primarily concerned with the working of the internal organs and the glands of the body and operates on an involuntary basis, regulating heartbeat, respiration rate, digestion, and other processes. Okay, so kindly read up a little more on this and you'll get a whole idea about what this autonomic nervous system is all about, right? I'm at the last paragraph. Autonomous nervous system is particularly important in reaction to stress and emotional response, right? When you feel anxious during exam, your heart rate and your blood pressure increases due to activation of the sympathetic nervous system. The same is true for instances of anger, joy, excitement, and other strong emotion. The second portion of the autonomic nervous system, known as the parasympathetic nervous system, operates in an opposite manner. Activation of the system slows the heart rate, lowers the blood pressure, and enhances digestion. So when you run for a while, heart rate, blood pressure, sweating increases due to activation of the sympathetic nervous system. When you stop running after a while, heart rate and blood pressure becomes normal due to the activation of the parasympathetic nervous systems. Although the two systems operate in competitive manner, but they function cooperatively. So there is a balance in maintaining the internal organs. While autonomic nervous system plays an important role in regulating the internal bodily process, it does so mainly by transmitting information to and fro central nervous system. This is the central nervous system which ultimately regulates the activities. Okay, so here we come to the end of the chapter, unit 4. Yes, are you with me? So today we finished unit 3 and unit 4. At page number 67, you have the whole summary, right? After every chapter, there is a summary of the unit. If you go through that 2-3 times, you'll be able to understand, right? And then you can also check your progress, right, by reading the model answers. Okay, and there are also model questions that is given here, right? Go through it as logically for you for better understanding of the words like sensory nerve, motor nerve, right? Neurotransmitters, CNS, SNS, all these are given in detail. So if you go through this once or twice, you should be able to have a hold on this. Okay, so go with a positive attitude of this is easy. This is all about knowing my body, right? And this is all about understanding my own nervous system. when we go to that kind of a attitude, you will be able to retain what you learn. So learn to understand, not by heart. When you understand, you are able to write it even in your own words, but you can always make sure that you remember the important word, right? That is used. Okay. Are you with me? So I complete here now 3 and
Yes,
4.
ma'am.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. So everything is given in proper detail. Okay. So go through it and understand for yourself. It is not at all difficult. Okay. So when the next class gets scheduled, and that time we will go to chapter number 5 and chapter number 6. Right. So we will try and complete 2 units so that by the end of our classes, we are done with the whole book. Right. So at least you have an overview of the book, and at least in the class time, you are able to read up. Right. We don't wait for the examinations to happen to read one day before or one night before and burn the oil. We will now. Even today, if you go through the whole thing, what we learn, it will just get reinforced and it will be able to retain in your mind. Fine? Yes?
Ma'am, good morning, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, good morning, ma'am. Ma'am, I have a one doubt, ma'am. Whatever today you explain, no, ma'am, 2 units.
Ah,
Can you explain me in brief, ma'am, without reading the textbooks and all that?
Can you explain in brief?
Yes.
So much of information in brief. It will take another half an hour. I've been given only 1 hour time.
Not like that, ma'am. Only the heading and
So you
some
take
important line will be there, no, ma'am.
okay. So
Like
you
that.
just
Because we,
roughly go through.
yeah,
Okay.
because we are seeing this textbook, we have lot of confusion, ma'am. That's why I'm asking.
Okay. See, unit number 2, right? Unit number 2 talks about the research method, Amma. Okay. Are you with me in this?
Yes, ma'am. I'm with you.
Okay. So what are the research methods used in psychology? Right. So the first method is the introspection method, right? Where we need to look inside within ourselves and analyze and come out with the solution. That is introspection method. The second thing is the observation method, right? Observation method is very easy. We observe, right? We observe
Yes.
in a natural setting, and we also observe by being a participant or a non-observation from far, or we use camera or video, right? The third one is the survey method. Okay, ma? The survey method is used as a questionnaire, right? Used for population and all that stuff, right? And then we use case study method. Very easy. Case studies methods are used in clinics, in hospitals, in institutions where the focus is on individual, right? And then we have the experimental method. The experimental method is quite long, right? In the experimental method, we learned about what is a variable, right? And what is a dependent variable, what is an independent variable, what is an extraneous variable, and confounding variable. I have given you example. Your book also is giving you example. Please read it up. Okay. And then we move on to operational definitions of how we can define the variables, right? And then methods of establishing the control. Like establish a method of experimental, a method of research, right? And then we moved on to the stages of experimental method, right? This is a long question answer also, short as it can come. Like, so how do we, what are the different stages? So we have the description of the problem, we have the formation of hypothesis, we make a prediction, we test, we analyze them, we discuss, and then we write the report. Okay, so there are 7 steps in the experimental method, and then we have the advantage. We have the correlation method. Okay, so with that,
Somebody is muted, ma'am. There's a lot of disturbance.
yes. Then we go to the unit 4. In the unit 4, there is neural basis of behavior. So what is about the neural basis of behavior? There is neuron. Okay. Then there is nature, nerve, and condition of transmitters, which is given to you in a diagrammatic form. And then there are neurotransmitters and their functions, which is given in the table form, right? And then there is nervous system, how the nervous systems are classified which is given to you in a diagram form, and then the details of the central nervous system, the spinal cord, the brain, and the functions of the brain. And there is the major lobes of the human brain, right? The functions and the different hemispheres of the brain functions and the autonomic nervous system. So this is what is being taught today. Please go through your unit number 3 and 4 and you will get reinforced. Okay. It is not at all difficult. You will be able to do it. Next session, we'll move on to unit 5 and 6. So with this, I end the class because I have another class within.
Thank you,
another
ma'am.
10
Thank you
minutes.
so much for guiding us, ma'am.
Yeah. So any problem, you can bring it to the next time when we meet again online. Thank you.
Sure,
and
ma'am.
God
Thank
bless.
you, ma'am. Thank you.
Have a nice
Okay,
day.
ma'am.
God bless you. Bye.